Good. I think we have a good amount of people here, so I think we can start. So welcome to the August CDM, everybody. I've shared the agenda in the chat for everybody to have. Um, this time we've divided the topics into four different categories to kind of make sure that we're touching all sides of Ceph that we can. So this first topic that we have today is concerns usability in Ceph and enhancing the Ceph user experience. The first topic on there we had was from Eval, but I see he won't be able to present today. So um, I know he had a really great talk, so perhaps we can move that to the next CDM. But this next one is accessibility improvements in the Ceph dashboard. Is Cedric on the call today? Not seeing him, so we may have to come back to this topic. I'll check in with him, but let's see.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me ping him. Maybe
Sure,
he missed.
thanks. Thanks, Ernesto. We'll move to the next topic for now, and we'll come back to the first one. So this next category is about quality in Ceph, improving Ceph's testing and release processes. And this topic is from Patrick. I actually asked him to present this because it seems really interesting, a PR he introduced just recently. So I'll let Patrick take that away. I can't hear anything from you, Patrick.
Nope,
No.
we cannot.
You're still muted, Patrick.
But we can at least see you.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it
No,
okay
you're
now?
good. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Patrick.
sometimes my video just is static and I have to restart the browser. Okay. Let me pull up that PR real quick. Thought I had a moment before we would get to this topic. And I guess it's already in the meeting agenda, but I also have linked that, the PR in question. And then I'll also just link in the documentation, which is also at the top of the PR. So to kind of go over what this is, up to now, or up to before this PR was merged, technology, we construct a matrix of YAML fragments, which kind of lets us turn various knobs on or off and select different distributions to run Ceph on, have a set of tasks we run for all the different configurations, and you just construct this gigantic matrix of all the jobs. And all these fragments are merged together into one single YAML file. So Tithology would, had these methods for actually constructing the matrix. You could like create submatrices, which would be multiplied with the larger matrix, or you could even add all of the YAML files together. So if like I had a folder of overrides that I wanted to apply to all of my jobs, I would just stick them in a folder and then add a little plus sign file, so that Tithology in the background would just merge all those YAML fragments into one and then apply that to all the jobs in the matrix. And so it's a useful abstraction for creating a ton of different configurations of jobs to test Ceph. And it's fairly unique technology in that it's a very in the way we're actually defining the jobs that we want to or the QA jobs we want to run against Ceph. It's more of a something more programmatic that might be created to create a workflow of jobs. But what was missing was sort of a way to have finer control over which fragments you actually want to merge into a job and which you do not. So you'd have to do kind of awkward things like if I wanted to apply an override to the Ceph configuration, but only if I'm running on Ubuntu, you had to co-locate those two YAML fragments together and potentially like copy all of the links to the common YAML fragments we have in the Ceph QA repository for all the different distributions we use. You have to construct your own folder, and then you have to lay out the matrix in a way that it would only apply the override to that particular to jobs that use Ubuntu, as an example. And it could be quite disruptive and sometimes even impossible to actually statically define your matrix in terms of the number, the number of files, YAML fragment files that you lay out for it in order to get the jobs that you want. And what we're missing is what we were missing was just a way to write scripts and say, should I merge this fragment, given that I have these other fragments that are already merged. So for example, coming back to the Ubuntu one with a particular configuration override. So if I'm not running Ubuntu, I'm running CentOS, then I don't actually want that YAML fragment included. So let's say drop it or modify it. Likewise, sometimes you'd also have configurations where you don't want to run the job at all because it doesn't make sense. Like in one of the examples for the in the documentation was I have an upgrade test with 16, which upgrades from two different versions of Pacific 16.2.4, the tagged version, and whatever the latest specific is. But to do the specific test I want to do, I need to be able to do a staggered upgrade of the manager. But that feature is not available until 16.2.10. So I can't do it. So it's useful to continue to just throw in this knob, which I can turn on or off to do this particular test, but it won't work with 16.2.4. And it's not really possible to statically define the matrix so that I only turn that knob if I'm running 16.2.10. And so we kind of needed this ability to script it so that if the knob is turned on and I'm upgrading from 16.2.4, I just drop the job entirely, which is a lot simpler to do than like maybe copying the entire matrix into another file just to test that one knob. It keeps everything nice and compact and neat, and just use a script to drop those jobs. So that was the kind of idea behind it. So now, we, instead of just a static matrix of jobs, it's a little more dynamic. I shouldn't say it's now dynamic matrix of jobs because that's not really true. The matrix is static. It continues to be static because the first thing Tautology does is it constructs a matrix, and we're not adding jobs to the matrix. We're not adding YAML fragments to the matrix. what we are doing is allowing to just drop a fragment. It still shows up in the description of the job, but its YAML is discarded. And you can also just drop a job from the matrix entirely, which is actually equivalent to filtering it out. Now the filtering on the command line for Tathology is now implemented using scripts. So it's actually equivalent to filtering out it. The filter command line option is basically the same as what we're doing here, in that the scripts you might define in your YAML fragments can just drop a job entirely, just the exact same way the filtering does. So again, the matrix is still static, but now we have a little more dynamic control over what it looks like. You can even now use scripts to generate YAML dynamically. I don't actually have a use case in mind for it, but it was easy enough to plumb that mechanism in. So you can even, I don't know, create 100 exec tasks or something. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. It's probably easier just to run a bash script to do the same thing. But that ability is also there. And you can also edit the YAML as well, not just add it to it. But I would also caution that at some point that again, as they say in Jurassic Park, just we got so hung up on what we could do, we didn't stop to think if we should. So just because you can edit the YAML file in a script doesn't mean you should, because it could get really confusing really fast. But for simple things, it may come in handy. So I could go through the code or something if folks want me to. I don't want to force it on anyone. So let me know what we should do next.
Yeah, I was actually just going to bring up the use case I was thinking of with telemetry and run it by you and see if it would make sense with this configuration. So Yarid and I have been working to develop an upgrade test for telemetry since with the new opt-in flow that was introduced in Quincy. We would like to test things before and after an upgrade to make sure that certain features are working as expected. But we also, with this upgrade test, we want to test different scenarios. So for instance, if telemetry is opted in and then we upgrade, we want to test certain things. But then if telemetry is not opted in, and then after the upgrade, we would want to test for different scenarios. So this would kind of work in the upgrade parallel suite, where we would test before and after the upgrade. But it's not just a static one line through type situation. There are like two or multiple different scenarios that we would want to test for. So for instance, like if there was some way to trigger this condition happens only if telemetry opted in is equal to true, or this condition happens only if telemetry is opted in is false. So the way I saw your work here, which is currently applies to, or is contained with Cephs, I saw a potential use case with telemetry that we can make it more dynamic, since that's really what we don't want to just test one linear scenario. So do you kind of see how that could work? Would that make sense in the scenario that we're looking to test?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's kind of similar. You would, either turn on telemetry or opt in or opt out, ahead of time before doing the upgrade, and then afterwards, you could have your YAML fragments that either, are included if, or you actually run the job if if you want to run it with Tethology opted in, or you just drop it entirely if it's opt out. You can have all those knobs to turn on, and you might end up dropping like half the jobs in the matrix, but you effectively get what you wanted. Sometimes it's easier to look at something if it's like if it's a static matrix without any of the scripting involved, but it can quickly get unwieldy. So it can make total sense to have a mix of both. Just
Right.
to use the scripting to filter out the things you don't actually care about. But I mean, as you describe it, it sounds like it would be a good fit.
Cool. Yeah, and we're thinking of going first the static route just to get one scenario right, but then this scripting could be added in to test for alternative scenarios. So yeah, this is a really good thing that we have to consider, because to my understanding, there aren't many tests in tautology right now, like for instance, parallel tests or even stress split that really handle this conditional situation.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes what we end up doing is we have to run those conditionals in some kind of Python method to actually do that for us, which can obviously quickly get awkward. Because then you have to also, within the Python dynamically detect the feature, which it can get messy. So there's some of that in tautology. I think for largely we've avoided trying to get into those kinds of messes, and instead maybe just not do as much test coverage as we would like, and try to avoid it that way, and sort of limit our testing based off of the limited abilities of our tools. But hopefully that becomes less of a problem with this.
Yes, yeah, and I see a lot of potential for, I'm sure others have considered writing a conditional test and have limited themselves to not go that route. So I think this is a great feature to be added. And in general, the upgrade suite, there's not a lot of documentation around it or how the processes work. So any awareness that goes into this, and the pull request, as you've shown, is already merged, so that's great. But then I'm glad we have CEM to kind of raise awareness about that this is a feature available to anyone who wants to design a test in the upgrade suite.
Yep. Hopefully, it sees wider use, especially with upgrade tests. I think that's one of the cases where it can be the most useful. And then I think broadly speaking, our upgrade testing and stuff can be improved a lot, especially scenarios like newer clients talking to older clusters and minor upgrades, minor version upgrade testing, and that type of thing. So,
Right.
yeah, that's something that deserves more attention, and hopefully this feature helps with that.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Did you want to go through any parts of the code, or it's totally up to you?
I will if people want me to, but I don't want to inflict it on anyone who doesn't want to see it.
I say,
Patrick, I had a question. So you mentioned that the filtering options also got some massage with this change, but I don't see anything mentioning the filter options in the fragment merging doc. Is that the case, or have I misheard or misunderstood?
No, you're correct. It was because it's more of an implementation detail, I didn't bother including it in the doc. But So yeah, it's not in the doc, but we can talk about it if you like.
Oh, I was just curious because I haven't actually run into this case of just having something like having a matrix that is impossible which is just plain impossible to construct using the existing tricks that we've all learned with arranging directories and lexicographically ordering the fragments by prefixing them with digits from 1 to 9 and so on. So I was kind of able to get by just using those tricks, but I've often run into cases where I wished for filter options to be more expressive, and so I was wondering if this PR finally got that in place.
Well, so what you can effectively do is embed filters into your YAML suite. So like if I'm running the RBD whatever suite, and ideally whoever runs it should always filter out this stuff because it doesn't matter. You could embed just a fragment with a Lua script for that conditional and basically make that an official aspect of your suite. Just because you brought it up, yeah, I'll link to the code which handles the filtering in the Lua script. It's mostly just a transplant of the Python code into Lua, logically. It actually probably takes up most of the space required in like handling the filtering that was already existing in Ceph takes up more space in the Lua file than anything else to set up the actual scripts. But that's all it is. There is one missing piece which may be more relevant if you want to do dynamic filtering, like before running like the RBD suite, you want to filter out, I don't know, something like, so we can, obviously we have the command line options to say I want to filter out all the Ubuntu jobs, and that's easy, whatever. But if you wanted to do something more complicated, don't ask me what, but let's say we did, and you wanted to say write a Lua script for it, and then say put it in a YAML fragment that you pass to the Topology Suite command. At this time, this PR doesn't handle that because we don't actually add the base, that extra fragment that you pass on the command line, we don't add that until later on. But it would be totally feasible to also add that in so that it's always supply, it goes with the merging process. But at the time I didn't have a need for it, and it's just if anyone really wants it. But yeah, right now if you add like filters to a fragment that you pass on the command line, that won't work.
Okay, I see what you mean. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
If does anybody, can't imagine how anybody would have objections to Patrick going through the code.
Okay, I'll do it.
You can just give a high level, like you don't have to go into all of the super, because you also, Patrick has also linked documentation to this, so that will help for anybody that has further questions.
Yeah, I'll just load the PR and just kind of highlight the major parts without actually looking at it in a terminal, if that's cool. This may need resize, so go bigger. Is that good? That's a little too big.
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. All right, so let's find a place to start. So this is all testing. All right, so the place to start would be here is this run.py. Let's see. So here's this main method, which was called after creating the of jobs, is this collect jobs method. And this code is fairly obvious in what it's doing. It's just joining all of the fragments, reading the files into a single string, and then passing that to YAML loader. And is doing that for every job in the matrix. So this is that lexicographic merging of all the fragments into one set of YAML. And so that was, this code is basically, you know, how it worked before. And so the changes required started here. We needed to do the merging elsewhere. And you'll see that now I have this extra piece of the tuple for these job configs, which also includes the parse YAML, and that's just the text representation of the actual merged YAML that will generate in a different part of the code. So that's now included in this configs, and now this collect jobs method doesn't need to worry about merging the YAMLs anymore. And so this is now the, where is the name of this method? Schedule jobs method? No, I apologize. It's actually hard to read code in GitHub. Surprise, surprise. Schedule suite. So this is called by the Mythology suite command eventually. And one of the main things that happen that's of interest to us that happens is this build matrix. So this method actually like loads all the YAML fragments, looks at the directory structures, and actually creates the matrix. And what's returned to us is this configs variable, which is basically an array of arrays, and the inner array is the list of fragments associated with that job. And normally, again, the collect jobs method we had just looked at would actually read those YAML fragments and then just pass all of it together as one string to YAML load. We're not going to do that anymore. So now we're just adding another method called config merge, which takes all those configs, is going to return back to us a new set of configs, which, you know, some of the jobs may be filtered out, whatever. And you can see here we're also passing in these command line filter in, filter out, filter all to this method, where it's going to get passed to the Lua code to actually do the filtering. So we'll get into config merge in a moment, but you'll see that's actually what gets passed to collect jobs now, is this this new merge configs array. And so from this side, the changes required to modify how we're merging configs was pretty minimal. You'll see I noted, you may notice I get the length of the configs array here. That's just this generated is the number of jobs that the matrix actually created. And you got to keep in mind, and so, well, prior to this change, you may see like, Rados Suite generated 100,000 jobs and you filtered out like 50,000. Well, hopefully more than that. You didn't actually schedule 50,000 jobs, but you would see a message about that some amount of jobs is filtered. If you didn't use any of the filter options, you would never expect to see anything filtered out. You would always see all the jobs scheduled. But that may not be the case going forward, because again, with the Lua scripting, some things will always be filtered out. That's just the way the scripts were written. But the jobs still existed in the static matrix. So the generated is the number of jobs in the static matrix, and then after we pass it to config merge, this configs will have fewer jobs. And so you may always see some jobs filtered out, even though you didn't specify any command line option to filter out jobs. And that's just the way it is with the Lua scripting now. Okay. So the next thing to look at is this merge.py. So this is a brand new file which handles how to merge the YAML fragments. Here's the main method, but before we get there, here's where we just load the Lua runtime. So this is using a Python library called Lupa, which is a derivative of the original Lunatic project. Lunatic was just the original library that allowed Lua and Python to kind of coexist and talk to each other. Mostly to just allow you to embed Lua in Python and not the other way around. And so there's a few things that allow Lua to be able to talk to Python. Sometimes it can look a little ugly. Usually it's pretty simple though. And here we're actually loading this fragment.lua that we glanced at earlier. And then we execute that script. So we load all the functions in that file into this Lua runtime. So here's the config merge method. Coming back up. So here we get the configs array, suite name. This is used for the filtering. We don't really, it's just to reuse the same logic that was existing in the filtering. I don't really understand what the option does, but it's there. And then the keyword args is just whatever filters may be passed in. In fact, these are just passed on to the Lua runtime, unmodified. Comments. So here we're going through the list of job configs that was generated from the static build matrix method. And so again, it's an array of arrays. Maybe it was an array of tuples. Sorry, I forget which. Does it matter? Here we got the description. That's just the what you see in a tautology config, job config. The description is just like the prettyized version of all of the YAML fragments in the job. It's just a single string. And then the paths is actually an array of all the YAML fragments that need merged together. So here we're actually going to go through all these paths, and then we're going to open it. So one interesting thing that we're doing that is new in this PR is we're actually maintaining a cache of YAML objects associated with each fragment. This was just a small optimization I did that had a somewhat big impact in that if you notice from the old code, we read all the YAML fragment files, joined them into a single string, and then we passed that to YAML load. While the parsing YAML is expensive, it actually slows down tautology suite command a lot. So what we're doing now is we're just loading the fragment, generating the YAML associated with it, and we're caching it because it never changes. And we just do the merging manually, which we already had a method for in Python for doing deep merges. This is actually, it's documented in the commit, but actually has a significant impact on the runtime. That was actually ate up a lot of CPU for Topology Suite, especially if you were doing the Rados Suite scheduling. But so that's all this is we're just maintaining a cache of the YAMLs for each fragment. And then here we're creating a deep copy of the fragment. So if I'm running a Lua script that modifies its own YAML fragment, I remember I said earlier that you could actually use Lua to change what's in the YAML. Well, in order to avoid changing what's in the cache, we create a copy of it. Then we get what's called a pre-merge script. So this is run before a YAML fragment is actually merged into the full monolithic YAML config for a job. And again, it's done in lexicographic order as normal, as it was done before. But the pre-merge script gives you the option to completely drop a YAML fragment prior to merging it. It just doesn't get added to the actual YAML config. So here we're going to load that script if that exists and is specified in the fragment. We're going to be looking for the Tautology dictionary and then a pre-merge string. If it exists, then we're going to create a Lua script for it by passing that pre-merge script, and then some helper methods that need added to the script, namely the log framework, a deep merge method, and the safe load YAML method, which is at this time not used, and then just some environment variables for the script to be able to access, like the suite name, the complete YAML object up to that point. So everything before it's already been merged into the jobs YAML. So it has access to that in this YAML dictionary. And then there's this YAML fragment itself, which is just a copy of its own YAML, which it could modify if it wants to. But at this time, none of the scripts that I'm aware of use it. And some other things like the description. So we add all these things to the, then we also here add the keyword args. Remember I said if we pass like filter in, filter out to this config merge method, it also adds it to the environment, and that's done here. And then finally we actually run the script. And if it returns false, then we don't actually merge this fragment. We actually note in the this new Tautology dictionary with this fragments dropped array that this particular fragment decided not to be merged into the job YAML. That way it's not a mystery. You can, if you look at a Tautology job, you can actually see like, oh yeah, that fragment dropped itself, rather than the YAML associated with that fragment mysteriously missing in the config if you're looking at a Tautology job after the fact. Otherwise, we deep merge the YAML fragment object associated with that fragment into the complete object associated with the job. So that we do, so again, we do this loop for all the fragments in the job. And then finally, when that's done, now we do the post-merge step. So every fragment that is going to be merged into the job, into the object, complete object has done so. So now we're running the post-merge, and this is where the normal filtering, command line filtering would happen. And that's included in the post-merge step, and I'll show you that in a moment. So here we're getting the post-merge, or it's an array. Documentation just show you, and this is what it would look like in a YAML fragment. One of the fragments would add to the post-merge array like some Lua code to be executed. And now, since I have this open, here's the pre-merge. The notable difference is pre-merge is just a string, whereas post-merge is an array. You might have multiple fragments, all adding to the post-merge script. Whereas for a pre-merge script, it's each YAML fragment only runs its own pre-merge script. It doesn't run the other fragments. Coming back here, so we're gonna join all of these post-merge scripts together, and then finally run the post-merge job. Again, some environment configuration. If that all looks good, then we run the script, and if it returns false, then we drop the job. Otherwise, we yield it. So here's the complete YAML object. And that is the extra argument that we saw in collect jobs, which I'll just open up real quick in case folks forgot. Right here is where it would show up. You see here we just YAML dump that, and we're passing it to standard in to the internal Tithology job scheduler. This is also just another new optimization that Zach requested so that we don't have a ton of temporary files generated on the Tithology node in /temp. So that's that. I like to believe it's fairly simple. We can now talk about the Lua script, which generates this new script function that we saw being called. Where is that? Right here. So here we have a set of functions that we're going to allow a script to be able to call. This is just a security measure so that you don't have scripts opening files on the system or anything like that, or running the system Unix function. So it has a very small subset of the Lua built-ins, and it also has access to some Python methods, which are exported by Lupa, which will allow you to do things like create dictionaries or enumerate arrays or iterate through a dictionary, things like that. But doesn't have access to anything else. So here's an accept and reject methods that's talked about in the documentation. These are pretty simple. Accept just stops the script by calling coroutine.yield. All scripts are running coroutines. And this just allows us to make sure that, if I have a nested set of functions that the Tithology scripts are running, I can actually stop it anywhere and force it to return true back to this call. So that's why all scripts are coroutines. So I can jump multiple stack frames. So this causes it to be accepted, otherwise it's rejected, false. Again, this is just all of the code that came from elsewhere to implement filtering. I'm not going to talk about that. It's not particularly interesting. And then here's the function which generates a new script. Here we're creating a new environment with some of these helper methods I talked about earlier: logging, deep merge, YAML load. These are included in the environment, plus access to the allow list. This is fairly typical Lua code, but if you're not familiar with Lua, it might be a little confusing. So I'll be happy to answer questions if someone wants to know more, either now or offline. And then here's a header that exists for all of the scripts. Here it's checking some filters. This is slightly awkward construction, but basically we're getting the check filters function from the command line, which happens, what's it? New script. Here. Here we call new script. Oh, I'm sorry. Here it is. So here we, when we create the function, should probably start down here. So load is how you turn Lua text into a Lua function. And so we're going to, this takes like an iterator or a generator of strings to load into the Lua parser. So we have a standard header, and then if there's a script, we load that. Otherwise, here's the footer. Give it a name of the script. We only allow it to load text, not binary data, and the environment associated with the script. And then once we've created that function, we're going to turn it into a coroutine. And then we're going to pass it this check filters function I created earlier. So that's actually where this gets loaded in right here. And then as soon as that happens, we hit do accept so that that forces the coroutine to yield, which will happen here. And we don't do anything with the return value. And then finally, we return the script to the caller, which would be here. So then when new script is finally called, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to call check filters. And then that implements all the tautology logic for the command line filter options. And finally, after that's done, it's going to actually run this main function, which includes all of the code that came from the fragments themselves. I think that's all there is to talk about. There was, there's various plumbing outside in the other parts of the PR, but not particularly interesting. So anyone got questions about the code?
Very good overview, Patrick. Thank you. And I think the most relevant parts, it's good to know the internal workings here. Then I think the most important parts for people wanting to use this feature will be the pre-merge, post-merge pieces that you would specify in the YAML. Is that correct? And that's all in your documentation.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's of course important to see how that works internally. So thank you, Patrick. This is a really great overview of all of this.
Yeah, and since we spent some time here, if someone had the need for it, and we did not, or we wanted to go to dynamic matrix construction, God help you, you would want to be replacing, or you not replacing, but you'd be wanting to modify build matrix, and you would want to run Lua code there somehow. Totally doable. The wisdom of that I leave up to others, but I thought I'd mention that too.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Patrick. Does anybody have any questions for Patrick? Cool. If not, this meeting is of course recorded. So once the YouTube link is available, if anybody is curious about how this process works, the video will be available This is almost turned into like a code walkthrough. So fantastic to have this on file, and I think this will be really helpful for people to know in the upgrade suite. Thanks again, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Cool. So in terms of the next topic, I see I've heard from Cedric that he's experiencing some network issues, so we may have to postpone his topic to the next CDM. But if anybody's interested in learning about the accessibility improvements that have been going on in the dashboard, Cedric has linked his Etherpad with an explanation of the work he's done on the agenda. So yeah, but hopefully this topic will be covered more in depth and perhaps with a demo in a future CDM. Let's see, the next topic we have on our agenda is regarding performance. And this is all about boosting Ceph's speed and memory usage. The topics we have on here today are from, I'm not sure exactly who put this on, but I know it's from the dashboard team. There's been some refactoring going around with the perf counter priorities. And of course, perf counters concern every component involved in Ceph. So this is why this makes for a great CDM topic. And I'll let whoever put this on the agenda take it away.
That will be me. Can you?
I thought so, Perry. Thank you.
Well, hi guys. Well, as Laura said, the topic here is about perf counters, and as you might be aware, the scalability of the manager tightly coupled with the number of perf counters, and pretty much in big cluster where you see thousands of OSDs, mainly because, for example, I think with OSDs there are like 20 plus perf counters with useful priority. So that means that 20 times the number of OSDs metrics are sent to the manager and then parsed to be serialized in the Prometheus site. And also most of them are sent to the telemetry module. So that's another module that's affected by this. And what we want to do is to change the priorities on most of the components in Ceph, mainly OSDs, as I said. It's the main problematic component. And another thing that we should probably tackle is the overall system of the priorities, because we should be able to modify the priorities safely without impacting the manager modules in terms of performance and all of that. So yeah, I think that mainly my argument is that priorities are not that expressive enough for most of the use cases, and that is because the two main users of perf counters are, I think, operators that might use the perf counters implicitly with Prometheus, and also developers that might want to get the perf counter from the CLI or whatever. And to be honest, I don't know why developers would want the priority, because I mean, you can still call perf dump or perf schema. Also, I'm aware there is one command in Laura, you sent me that one, the Ceph daemon perf, which takes into account the useful priorities from OSDs, and it builds a table of perf counters and all their stats, I think. And for that one, I think you could easily create a layout for these perf counters and forget about the priorities there. And yeah, well, I've opened a PR regarding the changing of priorities, and the first thing that I did in the OSD site is defaulting the priorities to, I don't remember, I think uninteresting. But I did that mainly because we don't want to be sending all metrics to the manager. And I think that setting the perf counter priorities to default in what to useful as default is not the best way to do it. And yeah, if I paste the PR, 1 second. But if you guys can check that one and gives, I was about to paste in the tracker. Okay, there it is. Well, two things. The first thing is changing the priorities within this PR. I think we can all agree that most of the priorities in all the components are, well, don't have the priority that it should. And I forgot the second point. Yeah. We should, if we wanted to keep the priorities for developers to be used, we might benefit from having tags in perf counters maybe. I'm not sure. Need to see what you guys think. But for example, having a tag for Prometheus, and that way we know that in the manager we need to parse those perf counters to be added in Prometheus. Then goes with telemetry or Grafana, whatever. Also, I think Laura in the comments said that maybe there should be a configuration option to enable, disable this change. Once it's done, maybe we could modify the perf counter from the CLI, the priorities, dynamically. And well, I think that's pretty much it. But I want to see what you guys think. And maybe if you guys can get involved in the PR, and maybe we can move that forward.
So the way I see it, the biggest questions are with this change, we're having to modify like every single perf counter that has a priority assigned to it if we want to change that priority. And the potential impacts of this could be that, say, if this was included in a feature in a reef release, people who, and this is just concerning the manager, this would not affect the admin socket command that dumps perf counters. The command is Ceph perf dump, and that would not affect these commands as that comes directly from the daemon you're calling it from itself. But say we're changing some perf counters from not being sent to the manager module. If some people using the manager module are used to seeing a particular perf counter, but then in this next release they're not, that would be an issue. That would be considered a regression if they're not seeing a perf counter that we somehow decided isn't interesting, but perhaps to one user it is. So how would we? That was why I suggested if we do end up doing this, having some kind of config option associated with it, so that if a user decides or realizes, oh, I'm missing a perf counter now, they can turn this option off, so they would still be, getting that perf counter. But what are their options, or how would you address that?
I think if we could have a configuration that where you could change the priorities, it would be the best. But right now, I think all the perf counters are set in the code itself, so it's hard to go to that site and then recompile, and then you have changed the priorities. So first of all, we have to see how we could change the perf counters so that we could change them dynamically. But I think if we could have a config where we could change them, or a CLI command where we could change them, or whatever, it would be nice. And also we would save the users the problem of these regressions. But yeah, probably user will see regressions after this is done. we are not sure of every user what perf counters they use, so that will for sure happen. At least we audited the manager and the ODF and Rook side, and we checked which metrics were being used by Grafana. So that's one thing less. I don't know, guys, if you guys want suggestion or whatever, it would be appreciated.
Oh, I know. Could you explain? I sort of know, but just for everybody, can you explain how the perf counters, how the priorities are functioning right now, and how it or that they're all getting sent to the manager, but only on the manager side it filters out. Can you kind of explain that process?
Yeah, sure. Well, each daemon in Ceph has a manager client that is called, and basically what it does is it gathers all the perf counters from that daemon and it sends them to the manager, and it sends a report with of perf counters and sends all of them regarding on the priority. And so then in the manager side, we gather all the perf counters, and then there is one specific call, the get all perf counters in the manager side. So within a Python module, you can call that method and you can specify which priorities you want to filter out. In the manager side, in the Prometheus side, we filter by useful priorities. And that's where the problem comes from, since a lot of useful priorities are not needed. And then I think there were some, telemetry also, I think, uses useful, I'm correct. And then there are some extra modules that might call the perf counters, and those I think don't filter out the priorities, if I'm not wrong, but I might be wrong. And yeah, that's pretty much it. From the client of each daemon to the manager, and the manager will filter by priorities.
Right. Ernesto, from what I remember, you had suggested some alternative ways of filtering. Is that right? And could you potentially go into some of those alternative ways other than changing all of the priorities?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think that Pere has already covered one of them, which is adding the tag, and also the having a kind of an allow list or a deny list could also work. So that could be configurable. So if, for example, a user finds that the perf counter has been removed, they could easily add that to the allow list if we want to take that way. I think those would be the three possible approaches. Relying on the priorities. However, what we found there is that priorities are used for two different purposes. One is for developers to set the basically filter out some specific perf counters, and that might conflict with the other use case, which is the operators, basically. So for exposing the perf counters as metrics. And yeah, so I guess that developers probably might be unaware of the impact that the increasing, raising, or decreasing the priority of a perf counter could have in the manager. So that's why the proposal of using a tag like a manager or something like that could be useful here. So basically, we could cherry pick the perf counters that we really want to reach the manager. And the third approach would be the allow list or deny list if we want to take either. So.
And yeah, and with the allow list, it would be sort of it would be like by default, everybody on the manager gets this new everything that we've decided filtered, but then they can opt into or specifically allow certain perf counters to come through. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, I think Per has had a deeper look at this topic, but I think currently we have to establish two different gates. One is between the different daemons and the manager, I think currently that hasn't been, proved to be a bottleneck. It's been more on the Python API side with the modules. But anyway, given that we're clean this part a bit, we could also put this improvement there, right? And also in the interface between the manager modules and the C++ part of the manager, right? The manager daemon. That's probably where we should put this or strengthen this limitation, right? So right now, probably most of the manager modules use this get all perf counters call, which basically dumps all the different perf counters and then iterate through that list, getting all the data for the different perf counters. That clearly doesn't scale with that was our experience with the POSI testing, right? So with anything beyond a few thousands of OSDs, that will be a clear bottleneck. So probably we should have these two different barriers. And also with the Ceph exporter approach, which basically will start exporting the metrics of the specific daemons, probably for anything that's not cluster-wide, so OSDs, RGW, MDS, everything, probably should be not filtered out from the manager, if not required, right? So if a specific manager module requires that, and that's the alternative of using a allow list. Probably that will be easier. Because if we find once this is deployed, we found that we needed a specific perf counters, probably it would be better to enable that configuration rather than to, release a hotfix or something. So yeah, based on experience, probably that will be better. Only thing is it will be a bit ugly to see a configuration setting with a lot of metrics, but yeah.
I have a question related to the Ceph exporter piece, also related to the priorities. So the perf counter priorities right now just filter what gets sent to the manager. Is there any plans to use priorities in Ceph exporter to control what gets sent out into Prometheus?
We do that. In the Ceph exporter, we filter out by useful priorities. Whatever is not useful gets out.
Okay, so these priorities are going to mean the same thing to Ceph exporter as they do to Ceph manager?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay, thanks.
So we have to keep sending the perf counters to telemetry. So we might want to reduce the number of metrics that we send there.
So yeah, to clarify about the allow list piece, so that would be more like a filter between the manager daemon C++ part and then the Python side. It would be like editing or putting a filter in just one spot instead of this current PR, which is changing one by one all of the priorities of the perf counters that we don't want. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Also, if we were to implement an allow list, we could make it more generic so that the exporter and also the manager could gather those metrics.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm seeing with this, what I'm seeing with this this PR that you've been working on, having to change all of the perf counters in every single spot just seems like a lot of changes to me, both on your part and on the people who are reviewing it side. So I almost think it would make more sense to make a change in just one spot and have this allow list option that's, putting the filter up in one place instead of changing the filter in a bunch of places, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds good to me. We could start with OSDs since it's the problematic one. But yeah, I just created these PRs I changed the priorities of the metrics that I know are being used in Prometheus.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
it's good to start it's good to it was a good way to start discussion, and I think that's a good always a good thing to do. But yeah, I don't. The issue is I don't see this being merged anytime soon, just because it's so many tiny changes. And I'm starting to think that the allow list option would make more sense in the long run.
Yeah, the only problem that I see with that is why would we have priorities for developers? Because if we add the allow list, then the priorities are pretty much useless in the manager side. And I think that the manager side is the main daemon that benefits from that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think the priorities they're currently affecting they affect what's getting sent to the manager, and the intention is to align the Ceph daemon perf command, which shows up first. So I think it's certainly the functionality of them has gotten muddled from what I see.
Yeah, I think I pasted one screenshot from the daemon perf. I think it's pretty verbose. I don't think anyone could understand that table by themselves at first try. So yeah, that is command in specific, I think we would benefit from filtering explicitly which perf counters you want there instead of relying on the priorities. But yeah, but overall I agree with you. I think that probably allow list are the best option for the manager and Ceph exporters, since we can create a global config which you can change and the user can change whether.
Yeah, and whatever method we decide to go with, I think it's going to be just really important to weigh the pros and cons and to reduce whatever potential regressions might occur, and to have it be the most streamlined choice rather than a bunch of tiny changes, I think is the most important things to consider.
Yeah, I think I agree. And if you want, I can reduce the number of changes in that PR so that it only affects the OSD side. Maybe we keep discussing it there, and after that I can start working on a POC of an allow list.
I think a proof of concept would be great, just so you're not, working on a solution and then it almost reaches completion and then people will have issue with it. I think a proof of concept sounds great, even if it's even if it's closer to just a Google Doc, and then you can even make it more close to code. But just having some solution that we're all agreeing on and that we agree won't have a negative impact on future releases, and then moving forward from that proof of concept to completing the solution. I think that'll be the best way to get a solution finally decided on.
Okay, yeah. And I think that's it from my side.
Anybody else have comments on this initiative here? Seems like not, but if anybody has any comments, just please feel free to speak up and let us know. And thanks, Perry. Okay, the last topic that we have here on our agenda is it falls under ecosystem, building the involvement with the Ceph community. So this will be a lighter topic for us to end on.
Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, sure.
We have one more.
Exactly. Go on, Ilya.
Yeah, so there is one more which is closely related. I put it in the
Oh,
in the
okay. Sorry about that. I thought it was that was the same topic.
Yeah, so it's closely
It seems
related,
different.
but it's different. So in this previous discussion, it was mentioned a couple of times that what happens if, due to a bunch of these priority changes, a particular count or a particular metric that was there just disappears, and someone who relied on it would now, their automation or whatever they had built on top of it just ceases to work. And there's a larger concern here because I don't think performance counters, I don't think we ever promised any kind of stability guarantees. And not just for a particular performance counter, being there or not being there, but also as far as them being renamed or the semantics just getting changed in obvious or even non-obvious ways. This just recently came up in a PR that Radoslav put up for exposing in the messenger. There was a bunch of perf counters that just basically just a sum of bytes being either sent or received. And with the addition of the messenger to secure mode, these bytes can represent encrypted traffic. And there's a desire to distinguish plain text traffic from encrypted traffic. And so Radoslav added a perf counter for encrypted bytes, but at the same time, the existing perf counter which has always represented plain bytes, right, or at least historically, this perf counter is also incremented. And you can kind of see, the problem here is that ideally we would change the semantics of the existing perf counter so that if a particular daemon is configured to talk in secure mode, then the existing kind of plain counter would just remain 0, and then the new encrypted counter would be continuously incremented, instead of having both being incremented, right? So, but that is a semantic change. This kind of ties into this discussion of whether disappearing perf counter is an issue. And this is just kind of going one level deeper. This has come up in other projects, for example, in the Linux kernel, where the equivalent of perf counters was initially also just something that was there just for developers and for people closely familiar with respective kernel subsystems. But later on, it basically became a part of the kernel ABI, and this actually scared some subsystems still don't have any counters exposed whatsoever, because they don't want to they don't want to maintain them forever, right? Because if the implementation changes, if a particular function that incremented a particular counter just gets removed, then you would need to somehow maintain the semantics of that perf counter going forward still. So I think this is this is a fundamental guarantee that I don't think we've ever provided. And with increased use and increased kind of exportation of the perf counters into various environments, whether it's Prometheus or Grafana or something else, this is bound to become an issue going forward. because I don't think like when we are reviewing PRs, I don't think we pay close attention to maintaining perf counter stability. So that's a decision that we need to make and kind of abide by it going forward. Any thoughts?
A question. We have some in-project consumers of the perf counters. I guess dashboard, some monitoring stuff. And in this particular case, I would feel better if we, instead of redefining the current behavior of the already existing counter, I think it would be better if we strip them entirely, remove, and replace with something new. Something having basically plain semantic. There will be plain counters for unencrypted traffic, and let's say secure or crypted for the secured one.
Yeah, so that's basically a rename, right? That's a semantic change, but a rename.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get.
But what about backward compatibility? Do we have in project any consumer that really expect to have all the counters? I'm asking especially about the upgrade sequence.
Yeah, so that's exactly the question that I'm raising. I don't want to get hung up on this particular example of plain traffic versus secure traffic, and whether we.
It's just an incarnation more of broader problem.
Yes, exactly, and whether we can somehow massage the existing perf counter and just leave it there. Whatever. In this particular case, there are multiple ways to kind of address this issue or work around it. But there's a fundamental question of whether the perf counters are considered stable, because like at least as far as I know, at least as far as I'm aware, we've never made any promises, and the concern is that with multiple external users kind of starting relying on these perf counters being there, and oftentimes this is in different projects, and sometimes it's it's a project that is using a project, so that's like 2 projects away from Ceph. That's when that's when these things us changing something is bound to bite. So I think we need to, like as a project, decide whether we are going to guarantee stability with the understanding that it's going to come at a great cost, or whether we just kind of maintain the status quo and don't provide, don't give any promises.
Well, personally, I don't know the answer for your question. I don't know whether the perf counters interface is part of our public API or not. And that's the only reason why I'm so conservative in the PR. To be honest, I would love to not have such a guarantee. And maybe if nobody pop-ups here with concrete answer, maybe we should fire an email, basically emails to Ceph users and Ceph dev, just in case, and maybe even claiming, guys, we would love to even if we made such a claim, we would love to take it back from Riff, let's say. How about that?
Yeah.
Right. So one option might be to actually, similar to priorities, add a designation for each perf counter, whether it's considered to be stable. Because things like, for example, the number of bytes transferred by the messenger, like no matter how the messenger is implemented and no matter how many times we rewrite it, right, the such a basic counter is, would always be there. So it would make sense to have it as stable, mark it as stable and have it be relied on by external projects. But on the other hand, we have a ton of, for example, take BlueStore. There is a ton of internal counters that many users wouldn't even be able to make sense of. Because they are closely tied to the implementation details, to the way that the KV sync thread works.
I see your point. You are saying that our perf counters aren't heterogeneous. Sorry, they aren't homogeneous. They are heterogeneous when it comes to potential stability guarantees. Some of them are clearly. It looks like, at first glance, it really looks like a part of somebody's developer feature set, basically.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm saying, and that the way the way I see us going forward with this is splitting the perf counters into these kind of two groups. Because with Prometheus and Grafana and OpenShift dashboards and so on, we are bound to run into issues if we just say that perf counters are unstable. Don't rely on them. People will rely on them anyway, and so it would be much better if we could just designate the things that would more or less always be there, that are high level to the point that it makes sense to have a generic name for them and have them exported to all kinds of dashboards. And then on the other hand, still maintain the possibility that a developer can just add a perf counter to the function that they're adding just because they want to see how it behaves, and not worry about someone relying on it as soon as it ships, and then claiming stability on that going forward.
So
I think that's
one thing to add to Ilya. I agree, but one thing is just documentation. Also, I've gotten a lot of questions about, where can I find this information in perf counters, and we don't have it documented anywhere. So it would be nice if we are going to offer stability for certain things to have those documented, and maybe just documented versus not is how we say what we're promising to keep stable.
You can throw it.
I think there needs to be, I would prefer if this was, similar to how the configuration options, there is a description which is separate from, which is kind of a free-form string, and that is separate from a level or whatever it's called. Like there is a dev, there is, I forget, but there's a bunch of levels that that one can choose from for each configuration option. And I think this should be separate because because at some point this would need to be automated, and we can't just say if the description string is empty, it's unstable. If there is even a single word in that description string,
well,
then it's stable.
This wouldn't be explicit.
So I would prefer for these to be two separate dimensions, with the rule that if something is marked stable, then a verbose description is should be provided in the same commit, in the same change set.
Like that idea.
were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that this this also is a point in favor of, for example, using the tag approach for the perf counters, because it could be a way to put some hints in place, right? If, for example, if we go with the allow list or the nearest approach, that probably would lie in a different place of the code. So a developer will have to double check whether if they are changing the perf counter, renaming it, or changing the semantics or whatever, they will have to double check with a different part in the code, whether that's being used by the manager or the dashboard or whatever, right? So if we expose these tags within the perf counter definition, that probably would make easier for developers to know, okay, I'm modifying this perf counter and it's being consumed by manager, dashboard, telemetry, or whatever, right? That doesn't mean that there will be perf counters that will be used by other third parties, right? But well, I think it's a first step. If we found about these third parties, maybe they can also step in and provide their inputs here. But that might also help.
Yep, I agree. Separate from whatever allow lists or at the manager level, or at whatever higher level, the information as to whether the perf counter is stable must live at the same place where the perf counter is defined, together with the description string. This needs to be a single place, a single header file where these are defined so that they can be referenced. And in the future, I do see some automation built around this because just similar to how we have the configuration options defined in a declarative fashion, and then using those definitions, one can programmatically come up with a list of configuration options that are, for example, at a certain level, or configuration options that belong to a certain subsystem. I see the same kind of scheme applied to perf counters, because these are very similar entities at a high level, at least.
So moving away from the discussion about stability guarantees, I want to go back to Radislav's specific PR about Messenger. So Prometheus has labels, right? And the perf counter interfaces don't give a way to set labels on things. That's something that RGW and Ali are trying to work on. So I think the most natural way to do this messenger thing would be to have a label for encrypted traffic, but both encrypted and non-encrypted would use the same counter itself. So in Prometheus, you could look at that counter and see the accumulated stats of both, but you could also filter by encrypted or not to see the breakdown that way. Does that make sense, Radislav?
It boils down, like almost everything in this PR, about the target audience. To my knowledge, this will be for security engineers, for people who are not so terribly interested in graphical interfaces, rather in very low-level stuff. I believe that I can draw some assumptions in this area. That I can say that those people will be low-level programmers, system engineers, security specialists. That will be the target audience here. So even if we have any machinery to claim those new about stability of those new counters, will definitely say, well, they are not so stable. They are not part of our public interface. They are not even for regular operators. They are mostly for developers / security engineers. So any fancy presentation layer, I think, will be an overkill, to be honest.
Okay.
I think you.
Go ahead,
I think you kind of. Casey was asking something I think slightly different, because this is irrespective of stability guarantees, right? Any perf counter can be assuming a user defines or sets the priority option to a value that is equivalent to exporting everything. Any perf counter can reach Prometheus, whether it's considered stable or not stable. And Casey's point was about the kind of fundamental issue or general issue that we have with our perf counters is that there is a mismatch between how we historically defined perf counters, which is for every new value, we just chose a different name, or for every metric, we just picked a new unique name.
We are saying that basically those we got new value types for those for already existing counters. We can say that the same counter is carrying some kind of genre of value, extra genre of value. Like I recorded 42 bytes of encrypted traffic and 24 of unencrypted with the same counter, right? Some kind of multi-value.
Yeah, so that's more or less what it boils down to, because at the Prometheus level, like Casey said, there is this concept of labels, and the names are supposed to be really generic. So if it's a count of transferred bytes, then it's just transferred bytes, and then the kind of those bytes, such as whether they're plain or encrypted or whatever, is generally communicated via labels. And the problem that we have today is that the perf counter interface, like the C++ stuff in Ceph, does not support that. My understanding is that there is an ongoing project which the RGW team has kind of took on, and I think Ali in particular is involved with that, to add support to these key value tags to perf counters at the Ceph level, so that they can be very straightforwardly, like in a straightforward fashion, be mapped to Prometheus labels. But that doesn't exist yet.
I see. So this will be for future, and also it would change semantic of, I guess, some of will change semantic of some already existing counters, like the one for read and written bytes.
Yeah, some semantic changes are probably expected. Just because if we like when this functionality arrives, we would probably need to review our existing counters and probably massage some of them. We've currently some of this exists in the manager just to kind of work around the fact that our perf counters don't have any support for labels, and instead these labels kind of get embedded in the names. We're working around that in the Prometheus module in the manager, where there's a method that just performs some text-based processing and transforms some of the perf counters with unique names as they come from Ceph, from OSDs, it transforms them into more stable names the way Prometheus expects them.
Workaround for
yeah,
basically
we already have this workaround. Part of the integration of this feature would be getting rid of it and applying some of these workarounds at the Ceph level. Although they wouldn't be workarounds, this would be actually a proper solution at that point.
I see. Basically, but basically what we have right now is some kind of Kurzman multi-value support.
Yeah, just for selected perf counters that Prometheus really cares about, and that's done in the Prometheus module in the manager.
I see. Well, if we are already talking about the PR, there is another dimension for the discussion. It would be about the support for connection modes. At the moment, well, we have a few of them, but my impression is that only a very limited subset of our connection modes, connection types, is being really useful, is being really used. Just for the sake of completeness, I've introduced dedicated counters for all of them, because, well, when a security guy, when security folks are taking a look and are ensuring whether we adhere to our guarantees, to what is encrypted and what is kept plain, and this actually depends on a particular connection modes. Well, they need counters for all of them, which, as you pointed out during the review process, is complex. Is in many situations looks like an overkill. I agree with that. Still, for the sake of the completeness, if we take care about it, it would suggest to introduce counters for all of them, or maybe the better way to say that to limit the flexibility of connection of configuring encryption, compression, etc. For particular modes. Maybe we could strip some of them. I'm not sure. However,
yes.
it would be
definitely
a long-term effort. But I fully agree that, well, not all of them looks useful.
Yeah, so we've sort of let's not hijack the perf counters discussion here, but just to I very much agree with what you said about instead of further exposing the insanity that is our existing connection modes. That I don't think anyone can explain or why it is the way it is. I would much rather see us just walking away from that and reducing the amount of configuration options that are there with regard to configuring the CRC mode or the plain mode versus secure mode for Messenger 2. We really need to simplify that. And so just to kind of close off the discussion on that PR, I would much rather see us going in that direction rather than actually adding perf counters and further kind of cementing the fact that we have these different connection modes that are very confusingly named, and that I don't think anyone is.
I fully agree. They are confusing. They are hard. They are hard to understand even for developers. I would love to strip them off the project. Really. The only thing that is that it could take some time because maybe not. I feel there might be an urgency to go over the full-blown duplication process. So it might be even a multi-release gizmo, maybe a multi-release effort. I hope not. I hope we could duplicate them further, them sooner than later. Still, maybe let's not hijack this. In the matter of the PR, well, I'm afraid that we might need to introduce those counters first, then hopefully kill most of them all together with killing the extra modes.
Yeah, that's really a separate discussion.
It's a different topic. It's somehow related to perf counters by the single junction point we have in this particular PR. But yes, it's a topic for another longer, maybe even discussion.
Yeah, I think this would definitely need kind of wider input, and this is ultimately a core issue. Deprecating the myriad of configuration options that we have, and replacing that with something much simpler that would just allow to configure either a cluster that is just using the plain mode throughout, or the secure mode throughout, or the third option would be using the secure mode just for the monitors. These three options, I think, cover like 99% of use cases, and we can just stick to that and deprecate everything else. But that's a different topic, and that would need that would need to be closely investigated by the core team, and it is not related to perf counter discussion at all.
But I guess exactly like with the perf counter stability, we will need to keep everything explicit and well communicated to Ceph dev and Ceph users.
So if we're done with that, Casey, I just had one question. Is my understanding that the addition of key value tags to perf counters at the Ceph level is still on the table and is being worked on? By Ali or someone else on the RGW team? Is that understanding correct?
Yeah, Ali has been working on the data structures necessary to track a kind of big map of perf counters dimensioned by the set of labels that it has attached.
Okay, so the work is ongoing. That's great.
Yep, I'll once he has something more something to show, I'll make sure that it gets shared with the list.
Okay, so the way I see it in terms of reducing the load of the perf counters on the manager, which is what Pere and Ernesto and the dashboard team are working on, we first need to answer the question of stability, which will help out a lot when the dashboard team does decide to implement an allow list or change priorities. As long as they're not changing any stable perf counters, then it will be then we're not guaranteeing any perf counters that do get changed. So certainly I think we need to answer the stability question first. And I wrote a couple of bullet points down based on our discussion, such as that we need to reach out to the user mailing list, and that we have a lack of documentation around this that needs to go in. Because I agree, any perf counter that is counted as stable should be better documented than what it is now. And Casey, the work that Ali is doing, this is going toward perf counter stability, or did I misunderstand that?
No, it would be mostly unrelated.
Okay, gotcha.
Just one final kind of idea on this, maybe to avoid kind of the friction of introducing an additional field to the perf counter definition. Maybe we could reuse the priority, just perhaps rename it, and basically say that everything that well, we would need to do a full audit, of course, but basically say that everything above a certain priority, like for example, everything that is currently marked as important and above, that is stable, because it makes sense for something that is designated as important to stay important going forward and therefore be stable. And then everything that's below is automatically considered unstable and should not be relied on by any external consumers, whether it's the dashboard or anybody else.
But I feel like that's having more implicit meanings to this, which is something that we wanted to avoid, right? Because useful meant basically something was exported to the manager, and that's why we were considering adding a new tag. But that also means time stability commitment. That's adding a side effect, right? An implicit side effect to that meaning. So I'm not sure. I think it's better to make things more explicit. And if we really want to express the stability of the perf counters, adding a tag. I mean, I'm not sure if that's requires so much overhead, but I personally prefer to make things explicit and not adding more hidden meanings or implicit meanings to the priority. And if we find that no one's actually using the priority for anything, then let's get rid of that and use these other meanings, right? The manager or whatever, or the stability. But
okay,
it's like hacking the meaning of the priority.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was just a thought. So yeah, having these kind of two dimensions and keeping them separate is also completely fine, and obviously more straightforward. I think the priority would still be useful, even maybe not so many priorities as we have today, but some definition of priority would still be useful, because fundamentally that's a gate for what gets exported, like what gets sent to the manager, and that translates to physical overhead that is controlled by that option. So that option would probably remain there no matter what.
Yeah, about the priorities, whether they have a use or not. The only other way I see that they're being used, aside from what gets sent to the manager, is the Ceph daemon perf command. As we've said, the priorities decide what order they show up on when you run the Ceph daemon perf command. So the ones with highest priority will show up in the list first and going down. But I don't know who really uses the beyond the daemon perf command. I think that anything I've seen with the perf counters and the priorities, the meaning of priorities is not super clear, and I don't think it was meant to have a super important meaning in the beginning when it was introduced, and then it's kind of become something that we are depending on. So aside from the effects on the daemon perf command, I think that having a more explicit tag, as Ernesto said, makes a lot of sense, since the meaning of the perf counters is, or the priorities is kind of muddled at this point. And then just one more thing before we, unless anybody has any other topics or questions, comments to say about this, I always like to end these kinds of things with an action plan, a clear action plan, So how do we want to start this work? Do we want to start out by reaching out to the user lists or the dev lists, or how do we want to start?
I think the stability is the dependence for everything else. I would start from that. I would start from reaching out to both Ceph users and Ceph dev. Ceph dev.
Okay, and by reaching out, we would just be saying it's a consistent problem that perf counters are not guaranteed, and we're thinking of implementing a stable perf counters. Can we get some initial feedback on this idea?
Sorry, for all perf counters. If even we made any claim in the past, now we are taking it back.
Okay. Good. I think that's a good place to start, just to get some initial feedback from the users. And I can take on sending out that email. And those of you on this call, Radek, Ilya, Ernesto, I can check with you guys first before sending out the email to make sure it sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, Laura, for taking care of for that. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Yeah, of course. And whatever happens, we should just always have a clear plan going forward. And I don't want this to end up, because this is so important, I don't want this to end up just as another conversation we had on CDM that didn't go anywhere. So I like this idea where we're starting out by mailing the user lists, and we'll just keep going forward with clear intentions. Sounds good. Does anybody have any wrapping comments for this topic?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to add for this implementation for this sending all the perf counters to MGR. So what I just want to make clear that what actually means, because here there are two type of things. One which will mean is the MGR module, which we do the get for all perf counters call in the Python side. Other is what we actually saw in the C++, all the perf counters to MGR. So I just want to make sure what proposition can be based if we follow the yellow list thing. I mean, just can share my screen. Just want to make clear how there are two different problems here. One problem which you mean like sending perf counters to MGR. So basically, that's one problem. How to reduce that. Another problem is that all the different modules consuming those perf counters. So that's kind of a different problem, because they are using the MGR module call. And well, if some module wants to reduce that, they can use the yellow list. Also, I guess, dictionary also, which they will say we just want this type of counters also. They can filter it out from the perf counters call. But there are this different problem I just want to explain, and I can quickly share my screen just to so basically I just first want to clear how these how exactly perf counters are coming from. So different Ceph daemons, or these are just the example, RGW, etc. So each have the MGR client. Basically MGR client collects all the perf counters, and it's so it's kind of a report which is sent to the MGR, and this is sent on a stat speeder basis, which is by default around 5 seconds or so. So every daemon which you have will send to the MGR client and then into MGR. So it's like a huge load on the MGR right now. So this is basically what I'm saying is on the C++. So C++ side, how it's being done. So if we really want to reduce the load on the MGR, then things need to be done here. I mean, somewhere how this report is being sent to. Else, if we just do the if we just want to go with how the module wants to consume it, then well, here basically this is the perf counters call, which is being done in the Prometheus module, for example. Similar is being done in Telemetry module. So basically, if we can just have kind of a filter or so, which will say that I just want to fetch only this counters or this type of any regex that we can have, like I want just this counters also from this all perf counter score. So then those module will not have to get all this per counters load out. So yeah, so this is basically solving just a per module base or consumer basically using that call also. So this is a different problem if we just filter out from this all perf counters. And I guess there is already been a PR in which Ernesto has tried to do something similar. So I'll show that as well. So yeah, basically, yeah, he filtered out some of the counters which can be useful on the Prometheus module side. So we can do something similar, and so this is a Prometheus module solving its own problem. So I mean, whatever module wants, they need to have a list or so. I mean, basically, and they can just consume those counters instead of doing the all perf counter score. So this is a separate, I guess, different problem when you mean to solve the perf counters load or through priorities or through a low list or whatever. And the one which I showed before, it's different because this is kind of a complex, I would say, a problem to solve, because right now every daemon perf counters are getting sent to MGR because in CLI it may be useful. Someone wants to fetch some value or so. So yeah, I guess it's maybe necessary or needed for developer, user, whatever. So yeah, I just want to explain. Yeah, these are two different problems here.
Evan, that's really insightful. This is a great visual to have. Is there any way that you could link this and or at least the PR from Ernesto on the agenda? I think that would be great for us to have.
Yeah, we'll link that and this as well in the wiki, if I can. The PRs and both.
Awesome, thanks. Good discussion there. I'm glad we actually got somewhere. I was not sure if we would reach any conclusive thoughts, but we seem to have. So good job, everybody, and of course I'll take care of sending out an email to the user list to get the ball rolling there. Unless anybody has any last comments on this topic, I can move to the last one, which is pretty short, so we won't be stuck in CDM for too much longer. Any last thoughts before I move to the last topic? Okay, it doesn't seem like it, but if so, just please speak up. So this last topic on the agenda is about Ceph ecosystem building, involvement with the Ceph community. So as we've done in the past, Ceph is participating in the Grace Hopper Open Source Day event, and the Grace Hopper celebration is mainly an event to encourage women to be more involved in technology, and Open Source Day is for people from this event to contribute to Ceph for a day. So essentially, what I wanted to bring up to you guys is, in preparation for the event, which is happening in September, we need to have some low-hanging fruit issues available for the participants to handle. We need to have at least 30, I believe. So in this link, I've begun tagging low-hanging fruit trackers, and we have like about 60, so it's a lot, but some of them I've noticed are old or outdated, or may still be a little bit difficult for first-time users or first-time developers. So I essentially want to make sure that we have a good selection. And we have a lot of low-hanging fruit issues from Rados and the dashboard and some managers issues as well, but we are lacking some issues from Cephfs, RBD, RGW, and even Tautology is a contender there. So if you are aware of any kind of low-hanging fruit issues, and by that I would mean like code cleanups or clarify this logging here, or there's a compiler warning that's popping up, can you please fix this? Those kinds of smaller issues. Please feel free to tag those with the low-hanging fruit tag, or you can create any new issues that pop up. Those are always kind of hard to create, but I'm sure we have a lot that are out there that just aren't tagged. So please, if you have a moment, it would be great if you could go through, if you know of any trackers that would be good contenders for low-hanging fruit issues, go ahead and tag those, and that'll really help out in OSD Day. And you might get somebody taking care of these little issues for you that would otherwise, take a while to get completed. That's all I had there, and the link I shared, if you tag it correctly, it should show up on that list. But yeah, that's it for me. Anybody has questions about that, but that's pretty straightforward. And I think that's a wrap on this month's CDM. Good discussion, everybody, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week and rest of your month, and I'll see you at the next CDM.